listening to yet another episode of Smash the Bug. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you here. And what's really cool is we got Phillip Jackson on here. He has been an absolute rock star icon in the Magento community as a whole. And he's emceed several Magento Imagine events. Not Adobe Summit yet, but Magento Imagine. It's really awesome to have him here because he started out as a developer and he has, call it, graduated to some places of tremendous influence in the community. And I hope to take from his story and share it with you how you can follow in his footsteps. Yes, you might not end up being the exact same job title, Chief Commerce Officer at Rightpoint. You won't probably have that same title, but you will still be indispensable to the community you serve, the companies that you work with. You will become irreplaceable. And that is such an important concept that all developers, all people who are working must master. So before we jump in and have this really powerful conversation, make sure that you have subscribed to the Smash the Bug podcast on whatever your favorite platform is. We're on YouTube, under Swift Otter channel there. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure that you are present and you have subscribed there. You'd hate to miss out on any great future content that's coming down the pipeline. So without further ado, I would love to introduce to you my friend Phillip Jackson from Florida, who works as the Chief Commerce Officer at Rightpoint. Welcome, Phillip. It's good to have you on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joseph. Wow. Dude, you are, from the last time I was on a show with you to now, it's like there's, you talk about graduation, the things that you guys are doing in your own sphere of influence in every way is so inspiring, and it's a real honor to be here. I love what you guys are doing. I love how you're building a community around this, and especially around Smash the Bug. I can't wait to talk about some bugs I've smashed on my own.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing that. Yeah, and it's so, your story is so inspiring. I remember, was that 2018, 2019, you shared your journey, a very personal journey with thousands of people, and the vulnerability that you set forth of being willing to share this story of how, of some of the challenges you faced. It's been incredibly inspiring to us, and I know it was inspiring to the entire developer community, the whole community that was in attendance at Imagine. So, you have very much been an inspiration to me, and I'm looking forward to hearing your stories, and especially how we can relate it to those developers who are listening here. You started as a developer, right?
I did, and I think that's one thing that is easy to overlook is that there's this notion, especially now that I've been in the e-commerce space for, almost 20 years now.
Wow.
I know it's ridiculous, but there's this notion of sort of this delineation of like who is a developer or who's not, like who's a manager. There's definitely some like fragmentation on what we call a developer anymore. There's front end developers, back end developers. There's UI developers. We have tech leads now, and
That's right.
We have juniors and seniors, and we have architects and sort of all these like. These designations of where you sit in the process of solving things with code to some degree. To say that I started as a developer is incredibly accurate, but I am still a developer today. I still use code to solve problems. The types of problems I solve these days are very different.
Right.
And I think, the skills that I've gained, I start thinking about how I solve real world problems in the same way that I would solve them in code, by abstracting ideas, trying to take away the minutia of a certain particular issue's problem and start to abstract like, what's the broader thing that I'm trying to solve for? That is something I learned as a developer. And so when you sort of alluded to my story, I applied the same kind of principles to weight loss, where I lost 143 pounds
That's
through
incredible.
Diet, exercise, and running. Thank you. That is part of. I gained the knowledge and the insight and the test-driven methodology, forming hypotheses and testing those hypotheses. I applied those same things to weight loss, same things I would do in trying to squash a bug. And so those are things that I've carried with me to a leadership and executive team role. and they're as important today as they have ever been in my career. So, I'm still a developer. I guess all of that to say, I still think I'm a developer. They just don't let me write code anymore.
That's good. I love hearing that, your story there. So maybe you can talk to us at the beginning, or give us a general overview. So you're here today, Chief Commerce Officer. Why do I want to keep saying operating officer? Chief Commerce Officer I almost did it again, at Rightpoint. What's your just a general history of how did you get started and what got you to this place today?
Well, how far back do you want to go? I could give you some vignettes.
That'd be great.
Like every other child of the 80s, I grew up with a computer lab in my elementary school where we had a bunch of Apple IIes. And, I gained some computer skills early on in, first, second, third grade. And I remember very vividly, thinking to myself whenever computer lab day was every other Tuesday. And it, for me, was the highlight of elementary school was being able to play on this computer. And, you learn very, very basic skills then. And, but it's the thing I looked forward to the most in school. I carried that with me all throughout school. My family was entrepreneurial. Both my parents had their own businesses. My mom was a baker by trade, and they had a computer in the bakery. And I remember vividly wanting to be able to use the computer. They had a point of sale system that they had custom authored, and they hired a software developer to build a point of sale because back in 1994 or 93, there wasn't necessarily commercial software that you could just buy to operate a computer-based point of sale and a cash register. Wow. Yeah. And long story short, it's this passion, not just for technology, but specifically for solving problems with code, was something that came up over and over again in my career and in my education. And I remember, talking about being vulnerable, I remember going to a guidance counselor in high school, and they said they were we sat down and sort of mapped out what my college journey might look like. And they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, I want to write computer programs. And they said, "Well, what kind of a school would do that?" And I said, I don't know. The only school I knew from television that had engineering was MIT. So I was I want to go to MIT. And the guidance counselor laughed at me and said, "Yeah, no, that's probably out of reach for you. You should aim a little lower, like a community school." And I remember that it wasn't devastating to me. It was I will prove these people wrong. There was some chip that formed on my shoulder of, I will do this now just to prove everybody wrong. Now, I've still not attended MIT, but I did fight and claw my way into a career that was, that I got paid to write code. And I think that in and of itself was a triumph based on a lot of things. I had 5 years of homeschooling, which sort of negated a bunch of high school credits for me. So for me in my junior and senior year of high school, I had to take summer school, night school classes to make up for credits during my junior and senior year while in AP classes. I basically took 4 years of school in 2, even though it's a long story. But the first thing that I think is most important is that I had decided in my mind that this is the career path for me, and I had the grit and the tenacity to see it through. That there was nothing that was going to stop me. I was going to graduate on time. I was going to graduate fully accredited, and I was going to make a career of software development. And I had no idea what that meant. The only computer that I had in my whole house, by the way, Joseph, at the time, we didn't have a family computer. I never did. Wow. The only computer I had access to was a TI-83 graphing calculator, and I spent 8 hours a day writing programs on that because that's all I had. And when you think back when I think back to that, there's something sort of innate in me that just I use the tools at my disposal, and I start with wherever I happen to be with the tools that I happen to have. I'm not waiting for some future state when I'm going to have some future tool. I just get started right now. I think that's key to being a software developer and being successful in that career is having the grit and the tenacity to see it through, and not putting off till tomorrow what could be solved today. Just use the tools you have and start where you are.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. Again, I love the conversation about grit. And it doesn't just apply to what school you want to go to, or, I mean, it touches every area of life, including when you're going to solve a bug. Are you going to just give up? Oh, I have to go get our senior developer involved in this because I don't know how to solve this. Or are you going to employ grit, and I'm going to solve this problem no matter what it takes? And obviously I know there's some balances. Management might not want you to spend 8 hours or 24 hours or something on solving a project, solving a problem, where when maybe again a senior could solve in an hour. But grit is so critical to excelling at our jobs, and you demonstrated that at a very early age. Again, I don't know what type of computer you mentioned, the graphing calculator, but yeah. writing code on a graphing calculator, I can't imagine that being a pleasurable user experience.
No debugging experience really either to speak of.
Okay.
But I will say, there's something about, just using what you have access to. In fact, it's a total anecdote and a side story. It's like there's a little bit of serendipity that comes along with being in this, in this industry, and recognizing opportunity when it comes along. The very first computer that I had that, what came by chance. This is like so sorry for the total tangent, but my very first computer was a 486, an Intel processor. It was a 486 that I bought at a Best Buy. I was standing in an aisle and just kind of pining for this computer, and some guy walks up the aisle and was like, "Are you going to buy this computer?" I was like, "Yeah, I was going to buy this computer, but I really don't have all the money." He hires me to build a website for him. This is like circa 1998. He hires me. He's like, "Could you if I bought this computer and paid you with this computer, could you build a website?" I'm like, "Sure, I can build a website." I had no idea how to build a website, but I learned how to build.
But you had the idea, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was the opportunity is sort of
Yes.
the unknown and solving for the unknown. I think is the key for again, it's part of the grit. It's or a curiosity too. Yeah. But anyway.
I love you bring that up. That you bring the point of curiosity up too, because that is another thing that I personally observe, and I it sounds like you see the same in being willing to. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to go. Again, it's related to grit. I'm going to go to whatever lengths it takes to figure out the why behind this question. What is going on. And you standing there at Best Buy, you had not a clue how to build a website, but the fact that you said, "I will build this website," showed that you believed in yourself. Obviously, if you didn't believe that you were able to take on such an unknown project, that it said that you believed in yourself and that you're willing to take on such an unknown project. And so I commend you for that as well. That's great. This is wonderful.
Well, the important thing to sort of take away here is that in our industry, it's even though I have seen over the 20 years that I've been doing this, I've seen it transform more into a trade every passing year, where there are tools and accepted methods of doing things and growing standards around the way to do things. I think that's what defines a trade, and proliferation of trade-based knowledge. We are still, at least in commerce, at the forefront. Like, we are at the cutting edge of things that are happening, that are being disseminated and sort of flowing down to the rest of every other industry. If anything, we are research and development, professionals, and we are always implementing things that no one truly has a good grasp on how the best way it is to accomplish it. Even in platform development, like, we're constantly forging new ground. And if you can become comfortable with being uncomfortable as a developer,
I like that. Yep.
You have to sort of become accustomed to no one else having the answer, and you having to find and seek the answer. And I think that's where having an air of curiosity in your job will do you well in our industry, is that the grit will keep you going, but the curiosity will sort of keep you invested. And that's sort of the important part of, what we do, at least in commerce, or any sort of platform development, is we're always pushing it forward.
Yes.
And you'll never be bored. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to make a quick shout out to your media company, Future Commerce. One might say, well, as a developer, do I really need to listen to merchant-focused information? And from what I hear, and I love the Future Commerce podcast and all the stuff you guys are doing there. I think the great value for developers to pick up an episode here and there, if nothing else. It'd be great if they listen to everyone, but like at least pick up a couple episodes here and there, is that it provides that broader perspective. Some merchants coming, they have requirements, they need to do X, Y, and Z, but getting out and understanding the bigger picture, where stuff is headed. I love the name Future Commerce, like where commerce is heading. That can help. That can provide better context for the developer. Push back on the requirements. Hey, do you really want to go in this direction? Understanding what they're building, because it can be such a problem for merchants when they give the requirements to a developer and the developer builds exactly what was required, but misses kind of the bigger picture as far as how other parts of the system are to relate together. And so having that broader experience, I think, also is a way to make a developer much more useful to the team, to the merchant for whom they're managing, building, whatever the website.
If I could elucidate on that a bit, first of all, thank you for paying attention to any of the content that I create at Future Commerce.
It's well worth it. If nothing, I got to say this. If nothing else, for the word pictures that you guys put in there, I am incredibly envious. Like whatever your course you're taking or doing, it's phenomenal. Like I love you pull these pictures eloquently, pull them together just like a fabric. It's like, wow. Yeah. So if nothing else, it's worth the read just for entertainment purposes. Although I would argue that the value you get is way more than just entertainment. So, but carry on.
Thank you. Oh gosh. I really appreciate that. And it is certainly a labor of love and something that we've, it's been a joy to watch it grow. I worked for the first 10 years of my sort of professional career in this industry before I was in the agency services side. I spent 10 years working at what we would now call direct-to-consumer startups. We didn't say that back then. Back then it was, I worked for a vitamin company. The first 2 or 3 years of my career, I was at a web to like a print, like a Snapfish competitor, a web to print startup that had an e-commerce shopping cart written in PHP and various, sort of like MVC style, like CMS tools, again, custom written. And a bunch of that work early in my career taught me that like what the business side and like the concerns around business driving product is like, I didn't have a job if we weren't, back then it was a lot of direct mail in that business. And it was like, if automobile dealers weren't buying our product to send as direct mail to their customers, then we had no business. And so providing sales tools, even like phone center management and CRM and call routing and VoIP, and like we did internal tools as well that weren't just the e-commerce application. It taught me a lot about the materiality of the way that business works, because business exists to serve customers. And so I carried that with me into the next phase of my career when I was working at what we would call now a digitally native vertical brand, which was in the wellness space. We just called it Vitamin e-commerce company. But that working there, I had this incredible manager who spent many years at SAP. And she sort of hammered home every single week in our weekly team meetings, the advancement of the product that we were building, both on like business intelligence side and ERP and dashboards, and the e-commerce site, which then was a Magento site build. Like the materiality was what she would say all the time. This is material, because if we don't sell vitamins, then we don't have jobs. And if we don't have a clear line of sight to inventory, if we don't know exactly how much we can sell, and if we don't know exactly how much is sold or or the profitability of a particular initiative, if we don't know what the ROI is on something, then we have no business. Like, you don't have a job, I don't have a job. Like, she hammered that home.
That's
And
wonderful.
I came out of that after that, decade of working in those styles of business. I brought that into client advocacy as an engineer at Something Digital in the services business, because when I would get handed a requirement, my first question was why? Why are we doing this? Because there's 15 ways to do this. Why is this the best way? Who's asking the client what specifically they're trying to solve? I'm just being given a requirement. And so again, I think it comes back down to sort of the curiosity. But there's a third dimension here. And it's not one we often talk about in developer circles, but I heard someone say some time ago, the best developer is the laziest developer. I only want to solve a problem one time ever. And then I never want to have to solve that problem ever again.
Sure.
I'm lazy. Yeah. And me being lazy and sort of bored and in the mundane makes me want to automate away half of the problems that I might have and like try to find simpler solutions. And what's great about that is having sort of that platform-centric mentality leads me to ask a lot of questions to say, hey, maybe there's a better way of solving this. It doesn't require me to have to write code, which actually leads to like long-term durable products that you build that customers are more happy with at the end of the day, because like they're overall, they have more tools to empower themselves. They things are less fragile. There's not as much testing required. The less code that we can write, the better, because Phillip actually, is kind of lazy. And I think when you kind of put all three of those things together, grit, curiosity, and maybe a little bit of laziness, I think it's kind of a powerful sort of like a trinity of an attitudinal alignment to professional and personal improvement. That I think the best developers exhibit. The best developers I know have shown all three of these traits to some degree, both in their personal and professional lives, that I think leads them to make others around them better too.
Wow, I don't think that could be stated better. I love that. Yeah, getting those three things: the grit, curiosity, and a little bit of laziness. I wrote an article about this, and my term was, "Am I too lazy to become lazier?" And I think you could say, I think maybe the word efficient might be able to be substituted in there. Yeah, but yeah, exactly. And I think the reality is, which completely flies in the face of a developer, is the less code we write, the more stable a platform is going to be, i.e. this platform will be most stable with 0 lines of code. That doesn't solve any problems. So it's trying to find the balance between lines of code written and the problem we are solving. So the less code we write, though, the better. And it's a common complaint for merchants, for example. Hey, I found out 6 months after you guys wrote this that this feature already exists, and put your platform name in there. So, it's available in configuration, or you can tweak this and it's available. And why did you bill me X amount and it's already there? And so having that, the more one can leverage of the platform, whatever other tools that are available, so you don't have to write code. But again, developers like to write code, so it's one of those.
Well, it's something I said in there was a Magento Masters piece that went around a few years ago, and they asked me for sort of like a pull quote, and it was something that I had been preaching internally at the time, so it just kind of came out, and then a lot of people tweeted it, which made me feel good. But it's like,
of course,
to developers, all solutions end in code, and to merchants, not all code ends in solutions. And I think that if you can find the happy medium of, we do need developers because nothing would exist without them, but we also need merchants because developers have nothing to do without them either. I think that you have to be solution oriented. I think that's why it's just so critical, again, to think about the materiality. I think. You'd sort of prepped me for this interview, and I was trying to think of a time where we had sort of this incredible bug to squash, and we have this long, really beautiful history and great case study now with Rite Aid, who we we've done a lot of work on their Magento and
That's cool.
AEM platform. But early days, we were called in to sort of right the ship and some performance oriented work. And I remember, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm saying it anyway. A lot of our the way we were going to get paid was to hit some pretty unreasonable goals. It was like, if we could make the page load in under 2 seconds, then great. But the page, Joseph, every page was loading, especially product detail pages were loading in 15 to 20 seconds. So there was a judicious use of, we had come in as sort of like the SWAT team to fix a bunch of issues.
That's incredible.
And so, everything had to be full page cached. And the only way like to avoid that sort of 15, 20 second crawl of a page load on time to first byte was to sort of full page cache everything and have like this aggressive crawler. Long story short, we had all of these like incredible tools for debugging. None of them would run on any of our machines because there was such performance issues. And so we wound up just breaking it down into smaller and smaller pieces, and we kind of brute forced a bunch of performance loading, and we narrowed it down to the nav, and the nav had 6,200 categories, and they were not all of them were being displayed, but for whatever reason there was a custom module that was loading every one of them as a model load in loop. And the only way we sort of narrowed it down is like all the tools we had at our disposal weren't working for us. What actually worked was us just implementing one part of the view layer in isolation and testing to see if like how slow it was, and that took 2.5 weeks. And we solved the project. But the long story short was, the tooling that we had, like everything that was there for us at our disposal wasn't good enough. The thing that actually like solved it at the end of the day was us creating hypotheses of where the issues could lie, us going to test them. And when that didn't pan out, we moved on to the next thing. And I think, that has served me incredibly well. That and by the way, I can't tell you, for every time that the tooling hasn't worked, when the tooling does work really well, sometimes we've also chased a bunch of red herrings that also didn't. Really,
that's for sure.
And so I think there's having a mindset for us around brute forcing when needed has also served me very well in my career. Var dump and die till the end of time. I'll do. It's the Kalen Jordan methodology of debugging. But anyway, that's the one anecdote I have. I'm sorry if it's not very satisfying, but long story
that's incredibly
short,
satisfying.
Yeah.
That's incredibly satisfying because I think that can be, like you alluded to, one of the challenges of having a great tool set. For example, Xdebugger, the profiler there, is how there's those cases where you can't actually use it, right? And then you can be out of options if you have nothing else to think of, versus, still being at it. 2.5 weeks is a long time to spend. I don't know how many developers were involved in this, but one developer for 2.5 weeks fighting a problem like that is a lot.
And an incredibly expensive proposition most of the time too, right? Like,
for sure.
The work that, you're not doing. It's I still think to this day, Magento test automation framework, rest in peace. It's like I likened my my Core i7 MacBook Pro at the time to a Harrier jet taking off, trying to run through, test cases. At the end of the day, it was like just echoing out a block, and timing time to first byte in isolation was the thing that helped us solve it. Because the MCG tools and stuff like that just weren't they just weren't performing for us. We had to get scrappy, and it reminds me, it's like back to TI-83 again. You just don't have the sufficient tools to get the kind of analysis that you might expect, and rather than chase that down the rabbit hole, like we had to figure out how else we could go about testing. That kind of brings us full circle.
I know. I was gonna say, we're about to wrap this up, but any last final comments to to developers as far as how they can become irreplaceable at the company? I know we've had a lot of great takeaways, but is there any other final comments that you have as far as what you've seen that really works for people?
Yeah. Let me say it this way. We didn't really touch on this in the broader context, but I think it's very true. The most irreplaceable people, although I'd kind of maybe argue that no one's irreplaceable. I'm not irreplaceable. Right. Anyone's replaceable, I guess. Maybe not. The people that are the hardest to replace are those who duplicate themselves. And I think if well beyond your ability to improve yourself, if you also improve others, if by your very nature of the way that you have, instruct others, inspire others, the way that you make others better around you just by your nature of your contribution, those are the kinds of people that I think are the hardest to replace, because they have a halo effect that exists well beyond the billable project that they're on. It makes every single project that they, every team that they touch that much better for it. And, those are the kinds of sort of culture adds and the people that just, they're the ones that you just wouldn't want to be on a project without them. We just don't celebrate enough. I think we should do it a little more.
Well, because again, it seems to go opposite or counter of what, if we want to become irreplaceable, what would seem like the most logical place is you hold all the documentation yourself. You don't train anybody, that sort of thing. But what you're saying, and I completely agree, it's the opposite that does that. So yeah, I think that's a great way to end this podcast today, is being as irreplaceable as possible through actually replacing yourself, making it so that it's easier to replace yourself. Is again completely counter what we would think, but I totally agree that it's the way to do it. So anyways, thank you, Phillip, for joining us on our podcast today. And I appreciate the great insight from somebody who has done some really incredible things in their career, being willing to share that with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thanks for listening to me. It's always a pleasure, Joseph.
Well, that was a wonderful interview with Phillip Jackson. And he's done a lot. He's had a really colorful career, but as we talked about, the most incredible aspects of that is his grit, his curiosity, and the training, the ability to replace other people. And so I hope you take from that the insight that this will give you. This is an incredible episode. So yes, thank you for joining us. Smash the Bug, another episode. If you have not already, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, our Swift Otter channel, or Smash the Bug on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. We are there. It was a pleasure being with you. I hope you have a wonderful day and look forward to our next episode that'll be coming out here shortly.